Hello, everybody, and welcome to Life After the Military, a show completely focused on veterans and their families transitioning from military to civilian life. Our show is powered by Pivotal Moments Media, an organization on a mission to strengthen mental fitness for all. Go check them out at pivotalmomentsmedia.com to learn more. My name is Lee Elias, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and co-host, Howie Cohen, and we are privileged to have Madeline Moulder with us today. Madeline was an Army wife for 8.5 years before her husband, Jeremy, who we've also featured on this show, was medically retired. During their Army career, Madeline spent her time volunteering in multiple capacities, including with the 8th 1st Cavalry Squadron, to include Family Readiness Group leaders with the USO and Spouses Club on Fort Lewis. For her service, she received multiple volunteer awards, most notably the St. Joan d'Arc and the Commander's Award for Volunteer Service. After leaving Fort Lewis, Washington, Madeline decided to further her education, obtaining 2 bachelor's degrees, check this out, in legal studies and interdisciplinary studies, and a master's degree in management, which includes talent training and development within psychology, sociology, and sports management. What's amazing about this is that education was all accomplished in 7 years while being a caretaker for her father, whose health was in decline, her husband, who dealt with PTSD and TBI, and their son, who was an active hockey player, something all 3 of us on here know about. Today, Madeline works with her husband on USA Flagworks, which brings high-quality handcrafted USA-made gifts with a story to the masses. Both Howie and I have one of those. You can see one behind my head if you're watching this episode. Phenomenal work. Madeline exemplifies not only what it means to be an amazing military spouse, but also an amazing person. And we are privileged to have her with us here today. Madeline, welcome to Life After the Military.
Well, thank you for having me. This is really cool.
It's great to have you, Madeline. We really appreciate you taking the time today.
As we say with all our guests, like the privilege is all ours. And Madeline, as we said before the episode, before we recorded, this is kicking off kind of the first of a series of military spouses. We're going to be highlighting military spouses throughout the next few episodes. Howie and I had this great conversation while we enjoy every service man and woman that we've interviewed. The families, the spouses, the children are part of that mission. And we'd be remiss if we did not focus on them as well. So that's going to dive us into our first question. Before we get into your amazing service, why don't we dive into when you and Jeremy, your husband, met? Was it before or after he joined the service? What preparations did you take mentally and physically when entering the service life? You know, what was that process like?
So funny story is actually we met in middle school, and we went to 2 separate high schools, and we re-met my 19th birthday, and I recognized him, and I told my friends at the time, I was like, I'm going to make that dude my boyfriend. And it was a bad time for you to drink because that's the best part, right? And we dated for 2 weeks, was introduced to his family once, and he was like, do you want to get married? I'm about to go into the Army. We might get to go to Germany. That's what I was offered, and I got
sold you the bill of goods. Yeah, we might go overseas.
Yeah, yeah, he was like an Army recruiter.
Right.
Well, the weather of Fort Lewis is kind of like Germany, Madeline.
That's true.
I know, but I would have loved to have gone to Germany.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was 19. I didn't have much going on. I was ready to get out of where I was, and kind of it seemed like a new adventure for me. So going into the Army life, he left while I was in a college anthropology class to go to MEPS. And after that, graduation, came up to Fort Benning when he graduated. Then he went to San Antonio for AIT, and we went to San Antonio. I was 6 months pregnant with our son. And then he came back to Fort Benning for airborne. And we came to that graduation too, or not graduation, sorry. He got med drop because he blew out his knees on the jump.
Wow.
And then that's when we left for Fort Lewis. I was 7 months pregnant, or eight months pregnant when we got to Fort Lewis, Washington.
So real quick follow-up for me. Questions I've learned to ask. Did you grow up in a military family, or was Jeremy the first military person you kind of interacted with?
No, so my dad was in the Navy. He got out shortly after I was born. I was born on a Navy base in Charleston, South Carolina.
There you go. Yeah.
And my mom was also in the Army in the 80s before she got pregnant with my sister.
Right.
And she was an MP. She actually was on top of the hospital when Reagan got shot. Like
Wow.
when Reagan got shot, she pulled security on the hospital, and she's afraid of heights.
Wow.
So.
That's a little piece of history right there. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the reason I ask is because, when you look at spouses, there's no one direction a spouse gets into a military life. Some people are very familiar with it, which sounds like you had some familiarity with it. I was not, right? And it's funny about sharing stories here because I'm a spouse too. I met my wife when she was 19 and I was 20 years old. And I'm often asked, my wife was a major in the Air Force. And a physician. I'm always asked, oh, so did you meet her afterwards? You married her because she's a doctor? I get asked that question, and people don't realize how insulting that is. No, I did not marry her because she's a doctor. But we met same age, 20 and 19 years old. And she said, hey, I'm in the military. I'm going to be going. Do you want to do that? And it's amazing because the service person, the person that's serving, really, it's funny. They don't have a choice, but they get orders, right? They've
Right.
chosen to do that. As a spouse, we're choosing the person, which means we're also choosing to follow those orders. So it's a very different mindset and a very different type of dedication because not to be sappy here, but it's based on love, right? You love that person. You're deciding to kind of spend your time with them. And I think what a lot of, this is probably more outside the military, but people don't realize that spouses have to sacrifice a good chunk of whatever they're doing as well to follow their spouse. And I have never, I got to say this, and Madeline, I love your thoughts on this too. I've never once regretted that decision, right? I had a career. I was working in New York City. I've never once regretted stopping that and following my wife. And not to rub it in, we did get to go to Germany, but we got to go places. I never once regretted it, but I also made the most of the time, right? Which we're going to get into later. But I just wanted to kind of, because this is the first spouse episode, there's so many directions that people get in. 19, you're just a kid. And so much can go wrong. but yeah.
Oh yeah. And you moved 2,800 miles away from any family you know.
Right.
That's something that I had to come to terms with was I'm now doing this on my own. And now I'm living with somebody that I dated for 2 weeks, and the Army kind of ushered him away, and we've only had phone contact. Now I'm living with a stranger. Right. So it was almost like a college experience, right? You're like, oh, I don't know if I like my roommate today.
Right.
And then you add a baby on top of that. So it was not conventional by any stretch of the imagination, but it worked. We just celebrated 15 years.
Yeah, congratulations. Diamonds are made under pressure, and you and your husband are both diamonds. Again, real quick, Howie, before you get your question, Madeline's husband, Jeremy, was a focus on the show. You can go check out his episode if you want the full context of his service. But Howie, I know you have a question. I should probably let you talk. It's your show.
It's our show, Lee. So Madeline, we the part of the focus of the show is transition, right? And what occurs to me listening to this part of your story is you went through, and you just kind of talked about it a little bit, and I want to draw it out a little bit more. You went through some very significant transition here. I mean, obviously leaving your home at a very young age, getting married, which is another stressor. Now you're pregnant, 7-8 months with a child. You're now moving to an area of the country where you have not been before, although it's an absolutely beautiful area of the country. I mean, for a 19-year-old newlywed with a baby on the way, now you're in the military, which is a completely different lifestyle from what you've experienced. Talk us through what you were going through and how you were able to manage your way through that. And oh, by the way, very shortly thereafter, Jeremy gets deployed to a very high stressful combat scenario multiple times. So what I'd like you to share with the audience is what you were going through and how you kind of managed to overcome those challenges, because I think that's a significant challenge for anyone to face, especially someone as young as you were in the situation you were in.
So I at first was very angry, right? Because he was gone all the time. and it was hard. I had to get my footing, and it started out making friends with some people across. So we lived in a quad, right? There was a bunch of apartment buildings, and I found some people that I could relate to. They were an older couple, and they had probably been married maybe a year earlier than us. And that's the way I got through it at first. And then came I had a lot of medical problems after I gave birth to our son. So that was another issue that I had to deal with. And when I would say it wasn't until maybe a year before he deployed, a wonderful woman walked into my life that her husband was Jeremy's new Meadow. And she kind of guided me through everything, and actually is the reason I became an FRG leader. It actually all happened by accident on how I became FRG leader. But
and for those of you listening who are not familiar, that's a family readiness group. That's a military acronym. Typically what happens in most units, especially ones that are highly deployable, there's a group of spouses that get together and they develop a rapport so that they can take care of each other when their spouses are deployed. They have periodic meetings, and they develop their own little kind of community, but it's primarily there to help the spouses of deployed soldiers to kind of manage the challenge of going through a combat deployment. So I just want to give a little context to the audience that may not have the military background.
Right. And with that, like, it built a community. Then I felt like I belonged. And I think that's a lot of the big issue when you move to a new place, no matter what your age is trying to find a way to belong. And once that happened, I became more confident in myself. Like, I wasn't just, PFC Moulder's wife at that point. I was making a name for myself.
Right.
And that's where I really got comfortable. Finding that transition point and having somebody basically walk me through how to be a military spouse, I owe that woman so much. And she knows who she is. But I mean, it was amazing. That's where it kind of all progressed upwards for me, was that. I mean, at that point, with my friends in the community I built around me, and then my dad came to live with us, and that's how I got introduced to the USO, because my dad did a lot of volunteer work with them. So.
Look, it's amazing. I want to tap on a few things for the audience. Again, every aspect of this. I was 27, I think, when we had our first PCS, which I was older, right? I had worked, I had been around people, I could take care of myself. I'd been out of the house for 10 years. 19 and pregnant. I mean, you go someplace you've never been, you barely know who you are at that point. If you're pregnant, my wife was actually pregnant for both of our children. We were PCSing during it. The first one, I think she was just in the first trimester, and our last PCS, she was 8 months pregnant. We had to get clearance to travel. That's how pregnant she was.
I had to too.
Right. Yeah. It's just, I mean, it's stressful enough without being pregnant. Right. Right. Just trying to kind of help paint that picture. It's so important for spouses when you get to a new base or a new location to get involved and to talk. Right. Madeline, that's what I'm trying to get in is if you end up not moving and sitting around, you can get extreme depression very quickly, especially because your spouse is most likely working right away, right? And it's really up to you as the spouse. You got to get the home ready. You got to get, a lot of stuff ready. You got to figure out food if there's a child coming or there. It can be extremely overwhelming very quickly. But I love that you had a great mentor. That's the first tip, right? Find yourself a mentor. That there is the ability to do that, and then you anchored yourself in. Okay, I have this goal. I have this purpose. Look, I've seen a lot of successful, the tightest knit marriages I've ever seen are military marriages, but I've also, as I'm sure you have, seen a lot of marriages fall apart in the military. And the ones that fall apart, there's a lot of different reasons, but it's typically the spouse is alone. Maybe even the active duty member feels the same way. It's not always like you see in the movies, right? Like where, they can't separate themselves from their service. That's part of it, but it's so important to have that support group, number one, and then a purpose, just like the service person.
Yep. Definitely. I have to say that was building my own community was probably the best thing I ever did. That's when I became really happy. And then I was devastated when we had to leave.
Right.
Because I had built that life. And then, you have to uproot and then start all over again, basically.
Right. Multiple times. And you don't, I said, and then I'll shut up. You don't typically, you don't ever get used to it, but you do get better at it. That's what I said to somebody, right? The fourth or fifth time, you understand it's okay, bye. And then you just leave. You don't dwell on it too long. Go ahead. Sorry, Howard.
Well, and so I think the other thing I'd like to kind of focus on, Madeline, is when Jeremy actually came up on deployment orders, kind of talk us through the preparation that you had to go through, mentally. What did the unit do to kind of help you there and kind of manage that? Kind of talk us through that process, because again, you're a very young woman, a newly married young woman with a child. It sounds to me like that's a lot to take on, and then have to go prepare yourself for your husband deploying. Kind of talk us through what you were going through, what you were feeling, and how you kind of managed your way through that.
Okay, so at the time he deployed, Jake was 2. And I will tell you, the day before we dropped him off, I was completely scatterbrained. I actually burnt all my fingertips. I pulled something out of the oven, set it on the counter, and I went to put it back in, and I didn't have a hot pad, and I put it right back. I grabbed it and I dropped it, and it broke all over the floor. So I will say I was a complete mess because I didn't know what to expect. And I mean, they give you informational meetings and you do FRG meetings and those types of things to kind of prepare you for what to expect. But it can never quite hit home until you experience it. And I never understood it. There was a friend of mine, her husband had deployed. I think the first time Jeremy deployed, he had already been on his 4th or 5th deployment. And she was just like, bye, see you later. And I was like, I'm over here like a mess, looking like a swamp monster, right? Like total mess. And she's just like, bye, see you later. Call you later. The unit, however, did also do something that was beneficial. When they would train, so they train about 2 weeks out of the month leading up to the deployment. They would not allow them to have their cell phones, because back in 2009, it was unheard of to have a cell phone over there. And if you got caught, you were in big trouble, right? So they cut off all communication with the spouse and the husband to kind of mimic what was going to happen when they got over in Afghanistan or Iraq, which at first I hated because I had a medical emergency during one of these times. And it took him 3 days to get home, and he was 3 hours up the road. So that was where it was, okay, this is real now, when I couldn't get a hold of him. And with that, going into deployment, it prepared me so much for that. In the fact that I didn't talk to him for the first 2 months that he was over there. So I had no communication with him whatsoever. And then once they started building up the area, we got more communication, but it was still sporadic in nature. So as much as I hated that when he was training, it actually did me such a service, because I did not know, or, going into deployment with the sporadic communication, I was already used to it, if that makes sense. So I do thank them for that. That was really nice. Along with, when the commander came back for R&R, he would explain what was going on over there in kind of more of a secret-ish meeting. But other than that, I'd say they well prepare you. However, emotional-wise, no. because then you get the questions like I got from our toddler at the time of, when's daddy coming home? And for somebody that's 20, I think it was 22 at the time. Yeah, 22.
Young. Yeah.
Having to sit there and say, I don't know, to a toddler that just wants his dad home. So I think that was a little harder.
Yeah. No, it's amazing because every spouse has a story like that, or a moment of, just say, a coming to Jesus type moment where you realize, oh, wow, this is real. You know, I remember mine real quick was my son was born, and I was blessed. My mother was able, we were living in England at the time. My mother was able to come over. And the way it was is back then you only got, I think 6 weeks off. You know, so my wife was out of work for 6 weeks, which is just not long enough. You know, they doubled it later on, which is still not enough time. But so I remember my son was born, she got 6 weeks off, she went back to work, and my mother was there for one more week. And at some moment, yeah, this will make you laugh, Madeline. I remember my mom was leaving a few days later, and my son was crying. And it just hit me of, next week, you're going to be alone with this child, and no one's going to be there to help you. You know what I mean? And I it's funny because you have this instinct, and I want to tap on this because you don't have a choice. And I remember I got up and I just started doing it. Right. And you know, we talk a lot about the human spirit, and look, for those of you who have kids or don't have kids, it's not the easiest thing in the world. I have a better word.
There's no handbook.
Right. But I do tell people, you know, there's like a sixth sense you have when your child's born that just kind of activates most of the time. Sometimes it happens right away. Sometimes it takes a few weeks, but it activates. And I just kind of started doing it, and really owned it. And it is a total baptism by fire in a lot of ways. And I was lucky my son was a really good baby. But yeah, I can't imagine. Look, I was 30 when that happened. I can't imagine being 22 and having my kid ask me, when's dad going to be home? There's so many stories. This is why we're doing this. Let me keep moving with the questions, because I'm going to lose track if I don't. So he goes on deployment, right? Now, it's not uncommon after a spouse returns from deployment, especially the type of deployment he was on, for to be some disconnect, you know, and or time needed to get back in sync. Did you two experience any of this in the early deployments? You know, was it weird? Was it easy? How did that flow for you?
We had some marital issues during his first deployment, and I think a lot of that was because we were young and we were both scared, right? My focus was on Jake, and probably not as much on Jeremy as it should have been during his first deployment. And I completely understand that. Reunion time was very different, because then you have to learn to live together again, right?
Right.
I've been in charge. Now I have to kind of surrender some of that to him, because before he left, we were 50-50. As much as he was home, he would take Jake as soon as he got off work, like, because I was home all day with Jake. And reunion was the hardest part, I think. It was just trying to learn who he was now, and he had to learn who I was now.
Right.
Because I was no longer dependent on him as much, because, well, you haven't been here for a year. So I don't even know what it looks like to live with you again. So it's kind of figuring each other out again. I would say it went pretty well. I would say Jake had a harder time with it than I did, because it was like, who's this dude? Like, coming and telling me what to do,
Right.
when mom's been here the whole time. So I would say it was difficult. He didn't show any signs of PTSD right off the bat. I would say it was about the 6-month mark after he had gotten home that everything came kind of crashing down. And that's when reality hit, that
Right.
nothing was the same anymore. So that, I mean, the second deployment was easier with him coming home. The best way I relate it is that a friend of mine was so happy to have her husband home, because that was his first deployment. And I said, you know, I am happy that my husband's coming home, but I know as soon as he walks off that plane, my job now doubles.
Right.
Because of his mental conditions. And whatever happened while he was over there the second time. So we got to kind of unwrap all that. So it was a sigh of relief he was home, but at the same time, then the real work begins of trying to get him back to where he was. So.
Yeah, we all love seeing those videos online of the service person coming home and reuniting with their families, and it is a wonderful moment. But as you said, the work kind of starts there, right? And how much, we always ask this question on the episode: what's it like to leave the greatest team on the planet when someone's transitioning out? I think about deployments. How much does a person grow in 6 months to a year, right? And then
Right.
if you're married with children, this is kind of funny, but it's like you do that by yourself for 6 months to a year. You know how it's supposed to be done. Your spouse comes home and they have their way of doing it, and it doesn't align with your way at all.
Right.
You got to deal with that, right? And it's not easy, right? So, I just think that that's an important part of it. And Madeline, what I do want to ask is, what advice can you give the listeners that maybe worked or things that didn't work so that they can apply that to their family, right? Children or not, when they come home, because, again, it could be communication. It could be maybe not lack of communication. I don't know what worked for you guys.
For us, it was getting help exactly when he needed it. Kind of setting that ultimatum. It's got to be present, right? That this is reality. We've got to get you some kind of help. And what I did was educate myself on what he was going through. Like, I had childhood trauma, and I knew what my PTSD looked like. But for him, it's a completely different situation with what he was going through. While the foundation's still the same, the means of how it came about were different. So I had to educate myself on kind of what he was going through. I went to as many appointments as I possibly could, to kind of get the feedback from the doctors of, okay, what do I need to do to help him? Right. It wasn't just about like what I was going through at that point. It was more, I put my stuff aside to make sure he was okay, because I had been dealing with mine so much longer. So biggest thing is educate yourself, and also sit down and have that conversation when they get home of, hey, this is what's been working. So you don't get into the fights like we did, where it was, well, you're trying to discipline him and you won't let me do it. And it's like, yeah, but I know what works with him. So, because I live with him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So kind of sit down and educate your spouse on what it's like to be at home, because they don't know that. They know, security details and medical stuff and all kinds of other things, but they don't know the home environment. So that would be my advice.
Hey, Madeline, you mentioned it was about 6 months into his return where you started seeing some signs that Jeremy was having some challenges. And listen, whatever you're comfortable talking about, I'll leave that up to you. But what did you start to see that kind of got you to the point where, okay, I know something's not exactly right here, and we need to do something? What kind of signs were you seeing? What kind of behavioral changes were you seeing that kind of, told you we need to do something? Something needs to change.
It was he was very short-tempered. Now, up until this point, Jeremy had always been what I refer to as Disneyland dad. He was always the happy one, like, yay, daddy's home, like mom's chopped liver because she's been telling me no all day, right? It came to a point, Jake had a whole bunch of Legos out on the floor, like the big block Legos, and he would just scream about the fact that there were toys on the floor. And I'm like, we have a toddler. This is not you. Normally you would just get down on the floor and play with him. Like, why are you so mad? And that's when I started to notice it was the short temper and the randomness of like when he would kind of explode a little bit. And it was like, okay, I think you need to go talk to somebody. I think, like, I've been through enough training classes, and they offer those with the FRG, with, they have somebody come in and talk to you about what to look for when they come home. It's closer to the end of the deployment when they tell you that. But I started to notice it, and it was like, okay, I think it's time, and we need to do this because we can't have this keep happening. And we we had a conversation at my kitchen table, and I had to drag it out of him of what all happened. And when I figured out like the grand scheme of everything and the magnitude of everything, it was like, okay, we need to go get you help.
How responsive was he to that, to you reaching out like that? Because at some point, I imagine some people will go into denial or say, I can handle this. Obviously, you recognize it was something a little bit more severe than that. How did he respond to your reaching out, and kind of talk us through how you finally got to the point where he was open to seeking help?
Yeah, I think at first it was the old school Army approach that if you pretend like it's not there, it's not there, right? I think he did go through a little bit of denial of just, no, everything's fine. And it's like, no, I think you've seen some stuff and you've done some stuff, and we need to go get you to the right people. And at first he was a little hesitant about doing it because he didn't want it to mess up his Army career. And that's kind of the old school approach to PTSD and everything, is if I go get help, it's a death sentence on my career. But once he started getting the help, he saw the benefit of it and how much better he was doing. And we didn't kind of go backwards. I mean, we kind of, once the transition happened out, we were kind of in flux for a little bit. But I mean, that's to be expected when he had change disorder, or adjustment disorder, that's what it is. So that was a little hard, but for the most part, he was hesitant at first, but then once he saw the benefits of it, we were good.
We got to remind the audience, just to give some context. So Jeremy was in Afghanistan, and he was serving an extreme combat zone. So I'm not going to go into it, but we just want to give some context to the audience. As he was there during a very tumultuous time and experienced a lot of things.
Well, and to just add to that a little bit, Lee, as a combat medic as well. So Jeremy was responsible for saving hundreds of lives in multiple combat deployments. So it's even more than just being in a combat zone. He was dealing with combat casualties on a very regular basis, which I could only imagine would just increase the challenges that he was going through on top of being in a combat zone.
Right.
And keeping in mind how young he was. And is, I should say, but you know what I mean? There's a lot to unpack there. I just wanted to give context to the audience. So Madeline, I want to focus again on the full width of the service right now before your very quick out process. But I want to talk about your volunteer work a little bit. And we alluded to this earlier, that, you volunteered a tremendous a lot during your time in the service, right? And we talked about how important it is to stay involved, right? Can you talk about that a little bit more, and maybe some of the things that you did and how you did it?
Okay, so when I had my medical emergency, I was not the nicest to my point of contact, who I did not know was the Sergeant Major's wife. Yeah, it's had some choice words for the Sergeant Major's wife. So enter Jeremy Meadows' wife, my mentor. She was like, oh, well, come to point of contact training, which is basically like a phone tree. And you're the head person, you'll get a list of spouses, and you'll call them when we need to make phone calls and, disseminate information. Said, okay, well, I'll give it a try. I was like, I don't know what this is. So I went into it. Who is running the class? The Sergeant Major's wife that I never knew what she looked like. And the person that I gave choice words to, and she asked me if I wanted a glass of water when I was heated and I never understood it, right? And she was the friendliest she could be. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so awkward. And I'm sitting there telling my friend, I'm like, I don't know if I should be here. Like, this is awkward. Like, I've yelled at this woman. Like, I shouldn't be doing this. And so I went through the training, and she was still super nice. And then we got to the part where if you have an angry person on the phone call and you ask them if they want a glass of water, and I was like, she goes, Madeline, you know all about that, right? And I was like, don't want to talk about this.
God bless you.
So that was my awkward moment, right? So I did point of contact for a long time with them. And about midway through the deployment, so Jeremy was separated from his original troop, which was headquarters. He was passed out to Alpha Troop. And the Alpha Troop commander's wife was pregnant, and she was the FRG leader. So they wanted to bring in a co-leader in order to kind of help her out, given that she's pregnant and she's about due. And I'm standing there talking to my friend, and who comes up, Sergeant Major's wife, and she's like, "Hey, Madeline, would you be interested in being the FRG leader?" And I was like, no, I don't know. And I looked at my friend and I'm like, yeah, see, I don't know if I'm ready for this. Like, my husband's a specialist. Like, isn't this for senior enlisted wife, like somebody else? And my friend at the time was like, oh, I think she'd be perfect at it. That's how I got involved. And I got sucked in, and I did not leave the FRG until we actually left Fort Lewis, Washington. So from 2009 to 2013.
Wow.
I was an FRG leader in different capacities with different troops and everything like that. So, and 2 deployments. So I did about a deployment and a half.
Wow.
As an FRG leader. And that is a very interesting role, I would say. And through that, I did a toy drive on their second deployment with the USO, because I had relationships with people at the USO. So they do toy drives up at Fort Lewis for deployed soldiers' families, and they work with a unit. The USO gets gift cards, and we get the toys donated. And I got bronchitis and $5,200 worth of toys for kids to deploy.
Two gifts.
It was pretty awesome. It was a nice thing.
Can you speak just real quickly to how important it is to have something like that? Because like I said, while they kind of finagled you into it, probably, unless you disagree, did you a favor by giving you something to focus on. Because like I said, I find that the spouses that really struggle, whether it's deployment or not, just have nothing to do, right? I'm not trying to place that on the spouse so much, but it's just, you know, I stayed extremely active in things while I was a spouse. I was doing stuff, you know what I mean? So can you just talk to that, how important it is to find something? It doesn't have to always be on the base, but to find something that can keep you moving forward.
Right. So I learned early on, right, that I am an information person. The more I know about a situation, the better I feel about it, right? The less angry I am and stuff like that. Once I got into the FRG, I kind of learned so much about the military. So it did me a dual service. It kept me active, but I was also learning about the ins and outs of the military. Okay, so this is not unusual. This is not weird. This is a me problem, right? And to curb the boredom, and it gives your kids somebody to play with, because, there's other kids that are going through the same thing that your kid's going through. And I remember I had commander's kids playing with my son, and those kids don't know rank. So they're just having a grand old time and everything. And we're over here like doing culinary things with an MRE, right? While the kids play. And it was, it's a sense of, you have people that know what you're going through. And I think that's also, like you've spoken about before, the loneliness. It curbs the loneliness. I think it's loneliness and boredom that kind of attribute to this problem, along with lack of knowing what the military is like. And you go into that environment, you actually learn the military. I got a crash course. I didn't want it, but I'm glad I took it. I didn't want to be in the military, but yeah, but you're in it. You signed the paper. You chose to be there. So I would say, yeah, it makes a world of difference. And you're giving back. Most times, I enjoy giving back to the community. In any way I could have helped is positive.
So what I'd like to transition now to, Madeline, is as if you had not had enough of a challenge up to this point in your life and your career as an Army spouse. We learned, when we met and interviewed Jeremy, that he had to be medically separated with about 90 days of notice, which is still absolutely unbelievable to me. So what I'd like you to kind of talk through is the challenge that you now faced as a family. Here you had adjusted to getting married, moving to a new part of the country that you were not from, being in the military as a spouse, being a new mom, now adjusting to combat deployment. So there's so much that you had, so many challenges you had overcome to this point. And now it comes to an end with little to no time to prepare, literally 90 days. Can you talk us through what that challenge was for you and how you and Jerry kind of maneuvered your way through that?
So the major challenge was, I would say, Jeremy. At that point, I had kind of disconnected from my volunteer work and I was focusing more on school. So I had something. And I think the toughest part for Jeremy was he was preparing to go officer before we got the news that this was pretty much over. And he was in school and everything. It was, my role shifted more to, let me show you how to be a civilian now, instead of, we're not doing the military anymore. We've got to find you something that keeps you just as active or busy, keep your mind busy. And I mean, he sat on the couch for a couple of months and was just like, I don't know what to do. And I think that was the tough transition, was trying to get him to see that, no, you're not broken. I mean, I know it was a kiss of death in the Army. It's just that you can't do the Army anymore. We've got to find something else that will help you, but in a different avenue. That was the main thing. Less about me, completely less about me. I was terrified of, okay, we've got to figure out life post-military.
Right.
And I mean, they don't give classes to the spouses on getting out. They will give a plethora of classes to service member. So spouses get nothing. But it's a transition for both. Because
Right.
the role shifts. You've been the main caregiver, you've dealt with the house and everything, and now you're transitioning completely where they're home all the time if they don't get a job right away. And some can't due to their, medical issues. So it's tough that way.
And I have to give context to this 90-day window, because I don't think people understand how short of a window that is. So, typically you have an out year. Usually it's far in the future when you start, but okay, we're going to be in the military till this year. Maybe we'll extend, maybe we're not, we won't. But, as it approaches, you have the time to kind of like, okay, it's coming, you have literally years in most cases to start to prepare for this. To be kind of cut off 90 days. I could see people not in the military saying, well, I wish I had 90 days between jobs. This is not between jobs. This is a complete change of the way you live. It is a complete cutoff from your support system. That's the big thing that I don't think people realize. That's both especially service people, but the spouses and the families. It is a complete cutoff from your support system, both the people you live near and with and the military, which it's one of those things when you get out, you realize that some things were done poorly, but a lot of things were done really well. Right. And that there was a lot of support.
It's a security blanket.
Totally. And it just disappears the day you're out. It's not, so to again, within 90 days, you got to figure out mentally, physically, where you're going, what you're doing. It is not enough time. It is just not enough time. Madeline, one thing I want to comment on that I've noticed about your answers. And I think that from my point of view, it's one of the reasons you guys are such a success story in our eyes, is that, when it comes to marriage, right, there's the, husband, the wife, or whatever, right? And then I always say, then there's the we, which is you together. And the couples that do well focus on the we, and they understand that you can't just focus on yourself or the spouse completely. It won't work. It can't stand on two legs. And what I love about you is you knew when to do the we, you knew when it maybe needed to lean a little bit more towards him because of PTSD and all these other things. I'm blown away by your selflessness of saying, I mean this, of he needs me there for this right now. And I'm blown away that because that is a lot harder than people realize. Well, you've been home with a baby for a year, and suddenly it's like, he's not where he needs to be. You could easily be like, well, what about me? What about me? I've been home with my kid for a year. I've been doing this by myself. And, look, I've seen that happen. And you were able to say, no, the we is more important here. And to successfully do that, we need to focus on that. There's no class on that. You kind of have that or you don't. Right.
I learned,
right.
Just to give you context of how I learned it when I was younger, I didn't have that. I didn't have anybody that thought about me during my trauma. It was pretend like it's not there. And it was very hard. So for me, it was when I saw him struggling, it was, I'm not going to make anybody feel the way I felt when I was younger, to where it becomes a bigger issue. And I mean, that's what led me to be so selfless, I guess, is because I didn't have anybody kind of be that person to say, hey, no, we need to sit down and talk.
Right. And you still made the choice though. Like again, a lot of people, especially in the situation that you're talking about, could just go, well, I dealt with it. And that's the end. It's just,
right.
Right.
Yeah.
I just, comment on that. I didn't realize this, service people are kind of on purpose and also inadvertently trained to bottle it up. Right. And I can understand, especially in combat, why you would need to do that. But, I remember it wasn't until like the 7th or 8th year of my wife's service, she kind of came to me and said, and this took me by surprise. Like, she goes, like, I'm so thankful you're like my rock when I need you to be. And like, I didn't realize that. Like, I just didn't click in my head that I was doing that, and how important that was, right? Because it was invisible on the surface. But the spouse service person relationship is so important. The military community is so important. And the way we work together, the way we especially when you're overseas, the way we take care of each other, and to have that cut off in 90 days. I talked before about 6 weeks is not enough for a baby. 90 days is just not enough time. And then so suddenly you're out. And again, for those of you listening that might not be in the service, you are out. It is it's Friday and then it's Saturday. It's a totally different.
It's over.
Right. And you got to figure out your life.
Yeah. I mean, the most scary part is the financial situation.
Right.
Afterwards is just trying to adjust to, okay, this is what we used to get. Then they do this crazy math and you're like, I don't know what we're getting. Hopefully we get a check. If not, we're losing the house. I don't know.
Right.
Like, so that transition period is so tumultuous. And then the crazy VA math and everybody's math. If you've never encountered government math, the whole college course on government math, I'm telling you.
You need a doctorate for that. And, speaking of college, I was going to say, Howie, I could ask this, or you could ask this. One of the other amazing things about you, Madeline, is your education, what you've done. Howie, did you want to ask that question?
Oh, go ahead, Lee.
Yeah, sorry. One of the things that I found amazing when you sent your bio over was that, again, getting one bachelor's degree today can be a 5-year experience, right? You managed to get 2 bachelor's degrees and a master's degree in 7 years. I found that to be amazing, right? So what was the driving force behind that? You said it a little bit earlier that you want to know. You always want to be in the know. How did you manage the time to make that possible? That's the thing that really amazes me too. Not that you just got 3 degrees, right? Where the hell did you find the time to do that amidst of transition? What Jeremy's going through, you have a kid, you're a hockey mom, which for those of you who don't know, that's a full-time master's degree in job in itself, which is expensive. So how did you even do that?
Looking back at it now, like, I don't know.
It's a fair answer. Yeah.
I didn't do in person because I always felt like I had to be home, right? I feel like the balance needs to be, I got to be home just in case. Like at the time, I was taking care of my dad and I was taking care of Jeremy. So I needed to be home. Online was perfect. And I actually had tried to go back to school while Jeremy was deployed the first time. And I was going for behavioral science. And when he got home, I kind of shifted and was like, I don't think I want to do this because this is my life anyways. And I kind of don't want to go to work and then come home and I'm still dealing with it type thing. So I went to a technical high school. It was the first of its kind. I was actually the first graduating class. And it was the top legal student in my graduating class. And I said, you know what? I love law. I'll try and get a legal studies degree. And I went to school. I loved it. It was everything that I remember from high school and why I fell in love with law in the first place. My last year of getting this degree, I never opened a book and I had straight A's in all of my law classes. So I was like, all right, this is probably the direction I need to go. The military, the VA pays for you to go to school. So it was almost like it was my job. I was getting paid to go to school and I was going to kind of ride that wave and keep myself busy in order to be better at home, where I wasn't like just sitting there doing nothing and wasting away. That's a lot of the pushback I've gotten our whole marriage has been about the fact that I never had a regular 9-to-5 job. But I did so much more than that. And I didn't realize that until I actually sat down and wrote the bio, that I was like, I actually accomplished so much and I didn't realize it. Like, you kind of just don't think about it. And I kind of took the negative in more so when I started my job search, in the past few months of just, I've never had a regular 9-to-5 job. Who's going to want to give me a job? Right? I don't have anything on paper that's like, oh, I worked at such and such, So education was important. Definitely important. I just like learning. So, and they paid me to go to school. So
yeah,
well, ride the wave.
You're one of the few people I've ever met that said, I just love law. I've taken a few law classes. I found them fascinating, but I wouldn't say it was my favorite subject. You're reminding me too, because this is what I find amazing about you, Madeline, is that I got my master's while we were in the service too. But I got one master's. I had no children at the time, right? And I basically did it because I wanted to fill the time because my wife was just not home that much. To do that multiple times while taking care of your ailing father and your husband and your child, that's incredible to me. That is unbelievably incredible. It speaks volumes of who you are, not just as a person, but really as an academic. The other thing you brought up that I want to tap on real quick, and I'm glad you brought this up because I didn't even think to ask this. When spouses transition out, sometimes it's from your husband or wife, but there's this expectation of, hey, go get a job, go get a 9-to-5 job. Mm-hmm. It's like, man, I have not had a 9-to-5 job in 10 years and I've been taking care of all this. You want to just go get a job. Like it's just, so it's not that simple. Right. Now I was blessed that my business partner and I, we created a business while we with two male military spouses, we got along really well. Right. And we created a business. And I remember when we got out of the military, there was talk from our wives of, well, you guys gotta get jobs. and our attitude was like, no, I'm not doing a desk job. Like, we're going to make the business work. And what we ended up doing was, to be fair, like we set a date in the future, not too far, of, okay, if we're not getting paid by this job by this date, we do need to contribute. Right. And we did accomplish that. But for the spouses out there, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this. It's there's a two-part question. How do spouses mentally prepare for that part of the transition of, you're going from complete financial support and a community to, you might need to get a job, right? How do you mentally process that? And then did you have any tips about that? Because you and your husband have a business that we have to talk about before we jump off.
Right. So I had the luxury that I got paid by the VA to take care of my dad. So I didn't have the typical 9-to-5 job. I didn't immediately have to get a job. But my dad passing away this past last January kind of put the constraints on everything. And we're starting a business and everything. And it kind of came to a point where it was like, okay, if we're not where we want to be by December when I get out of school, we probably need to go ahead and I need to start applying for jobs, and which I did. And I have maybe got 2 interviews, and one is with a particular company, and I'm really excited about it. It's the first one I interviewed for, and the recruiting manager, I was like, I haven't had a job interview since I was 16. Like,
right.
I don't. And she goes, you couldn't even tell. You just got to talk to people. And I was like, that would be my advice. In this world of like the Zoom and everything, you connect with people and just be yourself, right? Learn to communicate properly. And I mean, that woman had no idea that I'd never had a job interview. And I kind of relied a lot on my volunteer work.
Right.
And if you do stay active, I mean, that's a job in itself. And I learned that from the opportunities I've gotten, through applying for jobs, was that that's actually work.
Right.
I'm not getting paid for it, but I've learned, I have a lot of job-like experience due to that, along with my education. So that's my advice, is just, take the shot.
Right. Like experience is experience, whether you're paid or not.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Right.
As an employer, one of the things when I mentor even college students, I give them the same advice. Like, your experience is your experience. Don't be afraid to talk. Because as an employer, what I'm looking for, look, sometimes there are things like skill sets I want to have, but I'm looking for, like, what does this person do in a pinch? Can I work with this person? Is this person someone who's going to get the answer, or ask me to help them find the answer when, we have Google? Look, it is obvious you're the type of person that's going to find the answer. And I'll say this too for you, Madeline, and Howie, I'm sure you'll join me in this. Anyone that you interview with that doesn't want to hire you, that is their loss, completely their loss at this point. Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean that. And then let's quickly talk about, again, USA Flagworks, because I love what you guys do with this. It's an amazing business and an amazing message behind it. And obviously we gave Jeremy the chance to really explain how you get into it, but I want you to talk about your side of this as well.
Okay, so how we got into it. Jeremy came to me and said, this guy named Drew from the penalty box. And I said, yeah, I know who Drew is. He wants to make this a thing. And I was like, all right, well, I'll hear him out. I was like, I'm not committed to this. Like, I'm not
true
sold.
Entrepreneur right there. You don't even know it.
Yeah, right? Like, I'm not sold on this yet. He's got to make me believe this is going to happen. Sell me the dream, sir. And of course, in true Drew fashion,
right,
sold the dream, right? And then we were hooked. And, we got off the phone with him after I talked to him the first time. And Jeremy looks at me and goes, so what do you think? And I was like, let's do it. I mean, we have nothing to lose at this point. Let's just do it. And I have gotten out there. I am not a crafty person, right? I am not hands-on. I don't like stalls. I do not like anything that happens in that garage whatsoever. But for Jeremy, when we got the first big order, it was, okay, I have to help. Like, you can't do this all on your own. So I'm tracing stars. I'm polyurethaning, which I never knew. And I actually, the first flag that I did, I accidentally dropped it on the ground and like chipped the side off of it. And I was like, can you fix it? So I learned the ins and outs of it. And actually, I burn the flags now. So
wow.
Actually, that's a fun thing. I didn't even know I would like doing that, but I was like, oh, okay. Am I like a pyro now because I'm doing this? And I like it. So, I mean, I burn the flags now, trace the stars to kind of help him. He does all the design work on it.
Wait, real quick. We should tell the audience, when you say burn the flags, you might want to be a little more specific on what you mean by that, just in case someone doesn't.
Oh, yeah. No. I'm not. No. Oh, no. I mean, I know that's covered under the First Amendment, but I'm not
Right,
trying.
right.
No. I burn the stripes into the wood.
Would,
the
yeah.
flag.
Just want to clarify that real quick,
My
just in
bad.
case someone's
My
listening. Yeah,
bad.
no,
No.
no worries. It's a lovely
No.
business, and you know what I love about the business, Madeline, is you did it together, and you know it's another kind of marriage tip there. Not that this is a marriage show, but you know, look, there are things my wife asked me to help her with that I just hate it, or I'm not good at it. I don't want to do it, but she's asking me, and I kind of take note of that, you know, and that's so important to kind of swallow your pride sometimes. And it's like, my attitude is I don't want to do this because I don't like it, or like you do, Madeline, I can get good at it, or I can learn about it. Still
Right.
probably going to hate it,
Right.
but
Oh,
she's
yeah.
worth it, you know, like, you know,
Right.
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I completely hated the feeling of like polyurethane on your hands, and I like paint my nails, so I was like, this is
Yeah,
gonna
yeah, I'm
destroy
with
my
you.
nails, right?
Yeah.
And like with him, I kind of bullied him into it. Like I was like, this is not working. Like I've got all my stuff done. What are you doing? And he's like, I'm trying to do all this, and I'm like, okay, get out of my way. I'll do it. It's fine. I don't like doing this stuff, but I will do it to make sure that this is success. So I kind of bullied him into it. He hated me at first. But he was just like, no, we're going to do it the way I know how to do it. And it was like, no, this is so much faster if we do it this way.
Right.
So there was like a 3-day period where it was tough going with my boss that I work with, you know, and my husband, because he just did not like it. He was like, no, it's not going to work. And then when he saw that it started working, he was like, yeah. I was like, yeah, I'm right. Thank you.
So you could say when it comes to USA Flagworks that literal marriage, blood, sweat, and tears goes into every project, and
Yeah.
is delivered, handmade in America, delivered to your door. Anyway, joking aside, make sure you guys check them out if you're listening to the show. It's not an ad, it's not a sponsorship thing. I just love the message behind the company, and you know that's what you did together after transitioning from the military. You know, it's all for service, because service people care about service people. I have always found that to be so comforting. And you know, Howie, I'm going to throw the last question to you, but before we do, Madeline, I want to say this, and I say this every episode. You know, a lot of people idolize sports figures and celebrities, and it's just, my heroes have always been the military, and it's not just the service people, it's the spouses too. And I hear your story, you know, the Moulder story, and it's so inspiring. I mean, how can you not go through the rest of the day feeling inspired of everything you went through? You did it together, you got through it together. I mean, you know, and it's just, you know, in a time period right now where people are trying to get through the pandemic, you know, I lean on my military experience so much right now. You know, again, my wife being a doctor, I joke, like, this is like a deployment. I mean, I get to see her every day, but it's like a deployment right now. And I'm so thankful for the experience that I had in the military, because it really has prepared me for what we're going through right now. You know, but I just want you to know, I love your family. I love you. I love your husband. I love everything you guys stand for. And you guys are heroes to me. I really mean that from the bottom of my heart.
That's really sweet. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's really sweet. And thank you for this opportunity. Without you guys, we wouldn't have this opportunity. And I really appreciate it. And I'm glad I inspire somebody.
Oh, you do.
That's a really big thing. That's a big thing.
And to be honest with you, Lee, I can't think of a better way to close out the episode than just on that. I mean, Madeline, you are the epitome of mental strength. If anybody were to listen to your story and they want to define mental strength, I think you epitomize that. And I just want to reiterate what Lee said, what you and Jeremy have been through, what you've navigated, the challenges you've navigated through from the time that you met to starting your own business and raising a family. And I love seeing the posts that you guys put of your son. He's a hockey goalie and playing a very competitive level. I just appreciate you taking the time to be with us today and sharing your story, because it's a really incredible story of, I think, strength. And I think you present an incredible example for so many of us, whether in uniform, out of uniform, never have been associated with the military, follow. And thanks for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story.
Well, Madeline, listen, you're the first person to spouse series. You set the bar really, really high. I can't wait till our next comes on. Like
Awesome.
our last guest, I love law. She loved law, and she's raising a goalie, which for those who don't know, that's harder than just raising a normal player. No, it's been great.
Thank you very much.
We'll do a whole other hockey podcast on that, but that's going to do it for this episode of Life After the Military. Again, we're powered by Pivotal Moments Media. Make sure you check us out at pivotalmomentsmedia.com. We have lots of inspirational content just like this one, other shows spanning other verticals. We have education. You can also donate to charities pushing towards mental fitness. We're here for you and in the service landscape. So for Howie Cohen and Madeline Moulder, I'm Lee Elias. Thanks so much for joining us. Make sure to keep an eye out for more episodes of Life After the Military soon, wherever podcasts can be heard. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.